Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Sarah Dixon Morgan, and I am with the Wellness Initiative here at Albany Law. And we are so excited for this event. This is really just meant for you and on Zoom to ask your questions about finals and hopefully feel less stressed after this event. So we're going to start today with a presentation from Professor Armstrong, who has lovingly agreed to just kind of set the foundation as we begin final season to prepare and some study tips and just provide her expertise. So without further ado, Professor Armstrong.
Hi. Wow, are you all excited? No. Are any of you excited? Yes, right, to be done or to take exams? I would guess most of you are nervous about exams. And if I'm right, possibly because this is a different kind of exam than you've had before. And you spent the whole semester sort of feeling out what to do, and maybe you've been successful and maybe not. So I want to take a few minutes, and I promise just a few minutes, to talk about what a law school exam really is. And hopefully in the course of talking about what that exam really is and thinking a little bit about approaching, preparing for and taking that exam, you might be a little bit more relaxed. Maybe not, but that's my goal. This is what it's not: insisting or arguing on some form of rightness. Taking a position, working only toward the end, that end result, as though your life depended on it, misses the point of a law school exam. And this is a very difficult thing to give up, because most of us want to show everything that we know, and we want to be right. The thing is, if you take a slightly different perspective on your approach to preparing for and taking the exam, different from what you will have done before, I think, you'll do better. Think about for whom this exam is meant and what that means to you. For some reason, I've been signed out, I have no idea. Audience matters. As lawyers, you all, we all meet different audiences with different needs. We will appear before judges at different levels, even trial court judges, appellate court judges, highest court judges. All of these require there be a case in controversy. Remember that. Each of these judges expects something different from us, a slightly different perspective. The highest court, you know, of any jurisdiction makes some law. The trial courts resolve disputes between people. So we'll approach those judges slightly differently. We'll approach a supervising attorney a way that's different from how we approach our friends. We approach our clients differently than we approach our friends or our professors. And our clients are all different. They are people, of which there are countless. Sometimes they are corporate clients, sometimes they are government clients, and each of those clients has a different need of us. And it's on us to figure out what that need is and to adapt. And then, of course, there's us, the professors. All of us are different. I'm sure you know. Yes? Okay. Please notice who's not listed. Well, who's not listed? Well, the person next to you, your friends, you. Oh, wait. The exam isn't actually about you showing everything you know. Because you're not going to actually know everything, but more than that, it's about finding the right audience, recognizing that all of you are about to be lawyers, I don't know in what, 2.5 years, but from my perspective now, and from our perspectives now. And so we expect of you that you communicate with us as a lawyer would. There are commonalities among all those audiences. We all expect you to identify a legal issue based on law that you know. We all expect you to provide the authority for whatever you're going to say going forward. And to recognize that authority, constitution, statute, case law. We all expect you to analyze the authority if needed and apply that authority to a client's situation, which would be a case in controversy if you were in front of a court. This is what we're looking for. We're not looking for the I thinks, if that makes sense to you. There are differences among us as your audience, different professors. We expect perhaps a different expression of the rule, if you will. We might expect a different depth of analysis as you explain the law. We might have a different format for expression. Some people like IRAC or CRAC or IREAC or CREAC or just conclusion application. They're all different formats. But the content is the same. The structure of the presentation back varies, but the parts are the same. Maybe we'll give you a long essay, but you're still going to figure out what the legal issues are, provide the relevant authority, explain it and apply it. Whether in a kitchen sink setting, which requires you to spot a lot of issues, maybe a long essay that requires in-depth analysis of something, maybe some policy or short answers. Even multiple choice questions are exactly the same. Identify the legal analysis based on your knowledge of the law. Be able to provide for yourself, sometimes for us, the law. Think about it and apply it. The pattern is the same. Some of us create time-pressured exams, some don't. It's still the same pattern. If you have the right tools, if you know the law, if you can use your knowledge of the law to identify the legal issue, if you can explain the law, and then if you can connect the law and its explanation to a client situation, which is just a hypothetical, and then write as though you were writing to one of us or to a judge, as grammatically and structurally correctly as you can, you'll do well. They're the multiple choice questions and essay questions are the same. And I share this with a lot of people because, well, they are the same. Because we expect the same things. Figure out what the legal issue is. Based on your knowledge of the law, say the authority on which you're going to rest the rest of your explanation, explain it and apply it. This is a hypothetical here. It actually involves, well, I can read it and you can tell me what it is. D works as a manager at a fast food place. D's job at the end of the day is to make sure all the food is put away, that everything has been cleaned, turn down the heat or AC, depending on the time of year, and locking up on the way out. Late one night after a long day, D toured the restaurant as usual, checking everything, turning down the heat, and then left, locking the door on the way out. As it turned out, P had been in the restroom having serious stomach issues that took a long time to resolve. When P finally came out of the restroom, P realized the door was locked and P was unable to leave. P was stuck in the restaurant until early in the morning. Because the heat had been turned down, P got sick. What's the legal issue here? What do you think? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Very cool. What made you say that? Wild guess, no.
This person can't leave.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. If you catch someone's purposefulness as part of what you're doing in torts, and then you go figure out what the harm is, you can often figure out what the claim is. And that's going to be true in a number of different settings. If you can figure out what the harm is, you can sometimes work your way back from that and figure out the claim. So based on the law, you already know, we know the claim. We'll pretend for a minute that we know the rule, and then we can apply it. And you could respond out writing an entire relatively short essay response to this, right? I-racket or C-racket or whatever formula you use. This question happens to be a multiple choice question. And we can make any multiple choice question an essay question, and with not a whole lot of work, we can make any smaller essay question into a multiple choice question. And trust me, we do. So if we know that on the right side up there, you see the rule, and then we're going to see something else in a minute. This slide has everything on it. This rule is A, subject to liability for false imprisonment if A acts intending to confine the other within boundaries fixed by A, and A's act directly or indirectly causes the other's confinement, and the other's conscious of the confinement or harmed by it. That's roughly the rule. If we know that, we can then, because we know the legal issues, false imprisonment, we can work our way through the fact pattern and identify any of the facts that we would talk about in an essay to address any of the elements. And if you do that same pattern, when you go through the options, what's the answer, by the way? Does P have a valid claim for false imprisonment? Does anyone know, just sort of thinking quickly? You're going to say no because? No, because false imprisonment requires intent. D had no intent because, and that's a perfect answer. Notice all the sort of becauses, that's a little bit heavy on because, but the object is the same. So if we know that P's claim is not going to be successful because the defendant lacks intent, you can answer this multiple choice question in a heartbeat, because the only answer that says what you said is the right response, B's claim will fail because D lacked intent to confine, is option B. That's the one that you select. And you would have come to the same result if you had treated this as an essay response. So when you read those multiple choice questions, treat those as essays. What's the legal issue? What do I know of the law? As I look through the law, which of the facts in this essay pattern am I going to talk about if I'm writing the essay? Figure out the answer, and then you're set. Same thing happens for your multiple choice questions. We're looking for all the way through the exact same thing. What you need to do outside is obviously learn the law, but you need to breathe so your brain frees itself. You need to access information, and you need to then communicate it. If you're struggling to access information, a sort of down and dirty trick is to cross your ankle over your knee. And if that doesn't work on one side, try it the other side, because usually when we're anxious, everything tightens up and it's hard to sort. That act of crossing over, and you could practice that, helps you access information. And for breathing, use 4-7-8, and you can Google that. And trust me. And I was given my time card, so I'm going to stop now. Right?
Thank you so much. All right, now we're going to transition to the panel. Thank you so much, Professor Armstrong. Really appreciate it. We're going to transition to the panel, so I'm going to ask the panelists to come up here. They've got name tags, so just bear with us 1 second as we transition a little bit.
Please remember the slide, yeah.
Okay, thank you. You got it. Right, camera is not really on the panelists, and I don't really know how to fix that. but they can hear you. So do you know how to fix it?
There's like a thing to flip it.
It should be on
This
there,
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of.
Oh, presenter camera, try that one.
Uh-huh, yep,
And then like zoom out.
yep. No?
You mess with it while you talk.
I think it's almost, it's close. You can see it
Oh,
right there.
okay.
Almost. Okay. So I hope that presentation from Professor Armstrong was helpful. I think she provides some really great insight. So now we're going to do a panel with amazing panelists, and I'll just have them go down and introduce themselves so you can find out who they are. Rishi, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Richard.
There's no parameters, so just.
Oh, sorry. I like chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. I'm the president of Tulsa. And
Hi, I'm Willie Ferreras. I am a 2O. I'm the president of LAWSA, the 11th American Law Student Association, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Katarina. I'm a 3L. I'm the president of Outlaw, which is the LGBTQ+ organization. And I'm in some other clubs. I'm a 3L. Did I say that?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Christina. I'm a 3L and I'm president of also the Black Law Student Association. I'm Tegan. I'm a 3L. I am the executive director of the Food Board program. And like Kat, I am a 3L senator on the Student Bar Association.
All right. So that's our panel. We are very lucky to have them here, and I'm so excited. They are all amazing, and I'm very honored that they agreed to do this. So I'm going to share a little presentation just to get us started here. You know where you are. So we're at the Myth Busting Finals Wellness event. So I'm excited. And a couple of just ground rules that, oh, it's not up there. Okay.
Just check it.
Okay. So now 2 community agreements as we begin the panel for the panelists, but also for questions that you may ask at the end. So our main goals here, we're going to foster a supportive, generous, and respectful space. And for the panels and for your questions at the end, I just ask that you be respectful of the speakers and their opinions. Obviously, studying is kind of a controversial topic because everyone has their own beliefs and opinions and what works for you. So even if you disagree with someone's favorited method of studying, we just ask that you respect that difference. All right, and with that, we will start with the questions. So the first question is, how do I being a student who's taking finals, manage an intense schedule of studying for 4 exams, which is what most 1L schedules are. 2Ls might also have, you can sign up for 4 exam classes after 1L year if you so choose. And I don't recommend it, but you may. So we'll start with Willie.
All right, so for me, when I was a 1L, what worked for me is figuring out which exams took priority. I think in this year, it's CIRPRO, contracts, property and torts, not property, contracts and torts, whatever it is, whatever's first. In that case, I would study for whatever was coming first or whatever was weighted more. For 1L classes, they're all weighted the same, I believe. So for me, I would study for whatever exam is coming first, because if I studied for torts in the beginning, when torts is the last exam, then I kind of wasted my time to study for CIRPRO as my first exam.
Thank you, Willie. And Christina.
It's pretty similar, just subject by subject. Our 1L year, we had also property exams, so that was our first exam. So we had to especially make sure we prioritize our time subject by subject. But that's the basic breakdown, is just subject by subject. So you don't get too confused, you don't mix up things with different subjects together.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you, Christina. Ruchi?
so in respect to intensity, all you have to
just remember that you've spent 14 weeks learning the material, so it's not like you're starting from scratch. So you have a place to start from, and you want to not reinvent the wheel. So try to learn from what you believe in learning so far. So use your notes, your Facebooks, and utilize the power of repetition. You're gonna have to memorize a lot of stuff. If you easier to memorize stuff if you split it up into chunks. So you look at something. The way I memorized the civil procedure book was I would flip through it. Sorry, I'm staring at I would flip through it like every so often, and that was less work for me than running it over and over again in 2 hours. So try to use like brain tricks to memorize a lot of information. Give yourself some slack. Like exercise, like drink water. You're still photosynthesizing. That's actually French. And sometimes less is more. Like I said, you've spent 14 weeks doing this. You guys have gotten to law school here. So just, besides calling subject or subject, which is, don't touch anything if it's not next exam. Exam period is for like really honing in. And you're not really trying to do any relearning. You're just, you're just trying to not do any new learning, but you're just relearning. So with that.
That's great advice. And remember, you know a lot already going into these, so you're prepared. It's just about kind of honing it in. That's a good way that Ruchi put it.
And all together.
All right, so our next question is, how should I prepare differently for in-person exams than online exams? So obviously, 1Ls and 2Ls, you may have an undergrad background of online exams. 2Ls have definitely taken online exams, and 3Ls have taken online exams as well. So we're all kind of readjusting to being in person and some of us figuring out what it means to take an in-person exam in law school, which can be very different than undergrad. So Tegan, thoughts on that?
I was thinking about it. It's kind of funny because there's only like 100 some of us who have taken like a law school in-person exam, because we had our first semester 1L finals, and then second semester we went remote, and we've been that way ever since. So I had to like think back on it. It's like the actual test taking itself it feels really different than when you're like taking it online, like at my house, kind of leisurely. There are some elements of formality that you kind of have to just like prepare yourself for mentally. Like you have to check in with an ID, like the same ways if you're going to like a secure testing center, you can't just show up the day of. You're not allowed to have certain things at the desk with you. You have to get an escort to go to the bathroom. Like those elements you have to prepare yourself for, because it's very secure, which you obviously don't have to do when you're doing it online. So just make sure you are prepared for that, and you also don't have any questions or concerns about the medium that you're taking the test in. If that's ExamSoft, if that's Canvas, get all those things squared away so the day of, you know what's happening. You're going to come in, you're going to take the test. So outside of that, really focus on refining and condensing your outlines, especially if it's 100% closed book, which is what a lot of our in-person exams, all of our in-person exams are 1L year were closed book. You couldn't just like Control F and look for a keyword. So you really want to refine your outlines so it hits the biggest points and you can memorize those.
Absolutely. All great advice. Kat?
Basically what Tegan said, but if you've never used ExamSoft before, maybe you haven't had a midterm or it was on a different format. Like Tegan said, you can't Control F, you can't exit, you are just strictly on your screen, so you have no other resources on your computer that you can access. Also utilize like different study methods for each class. So if you have like one type of outline that you do for property, that might not be the best type of outline for civil procedure. I know for civil procedure, it's a lot of essays. So I would always like handwrite my essays, try and figure out like how to outline an essay in a way that you can do quickly and kind of memorize, so that you know like a structure. So then when you get to class, you're gonna get like scratch paper, you're gonna get your computer. You can also like handwrite on a blue book if you want to your essay, but like as soon as I would sit down, whatever was in my head, I would just like scribble down because I knew I would forget it once I started the exam. So then when I get to the essays at the end, I would like have this format already written, like how to do Erie or whatever. It's a lot of pressure to be in person. I didn't like it. I always sat like very far in the back, so I would just not have anyone looking at me, or I wasn't looking at anyone, and just like focus on my test, try not to look around, just stay focused on what you're doing. And Don't look at anyone's screen.
Alex Marie.
Hi, I'm your DGAD fellow, 2020 grad, and on your notes, don't look around. The proctors take their job very seriously. Anyone up there who's had an in-person exam that's exactly what I'm talking about? They're not here to speak for professors or any of the staff, they're outsourced proctors. They are cops. Know your habits when you're thinking. You're someone who looks around a lot or looks down. You're gonna come up to you and there's not much room for argument with them about like whether you're cheating or not. So just be very aware of how you act when you're trying to think and process.
That's great advice. And for the recording and Zoom, in case anyone couldn't hear, Alex Marie was just saying that the proctors love their job and take their job very seriously. So be aware that your habits, as in looking around and maybe looking down, like at your lap, people might be aware of that, and proctors might think you're up to some funny business. So
Just to add the, like no hoodies, no hats, because you don't want to have like a bad hair day and then like come here, they tell you to take your hoodie or your hat off and you're just even more of a bad mood before you go to your exam. So yeah, just make sure there's nothing on your head too.
yeah, Aruchi?
You can bring earplugs. So you should bring that. And you could beeline it after, so you don't have to talk to anybody or listen to anybody talk about the exam, that always stresses me out.
Mhm.
And I know everybody's gonna be typing like crazy, but like, you're not gonna die if you get up in the middle to go to the bathroom. I passed all my classes, I went to the bathroom, walked around every single exam in the middle, because a really important part to doing well in your exam is being organized. And you can't organize if you're rushing, so you just need to chill out. The writer says something, you gotta respond. That's just,
Yeah, go ahead.
Be on time, because if you show up late, everyone notices and it's really uncomfortable. You'll remember it. I still remember who was late. They always like are stressed out and like throwing stuff around and get ready. So just be very early.
every second counts.
Yeah.
Except the bathroom ones.
Yeah, and remember it's an adjustment, right? As I've mentioned, we're coming from this online world where like my cats were around my legs when I was taking exams, and like my cats aren't going to be in this room. I mean, as much as I might love that, they're not going to be here. And so it's a different kind of vibe, and just be prepared. And if you can be here, 15 minutes early, make sure your laptop turns on. I remember one of my exam software wouldn't work on my computer and I had 5 minutes and I think I was maybe the one cat remembers was late. And so just make sure like you have time to really chill before your exam. That's very important.
There's a practice exam software. Go through it, go into it. Make yourself familiar.
Yeah. All right. So our next question is, what does your exam study process look like? And we'll start with Willie.
Sure, so this might not work for everyone, but for me, I like to study alone. Well, I usually just lock myself in my bedroom for hours on end. And in that sense, I get on my desk and I like to take practice exams. If my professor doesn't give me any practice exams, they're readily available on the internet. But the caveat with that is that if you're going to use a practice exam from an outside source, to make sure that you tailor your answers to how your professor wants the answers. I did a lot for torts. If anyone has heavily for torts, you know that he likes his responses in a very specific way, in very specific language. So you would tailor these answers to the outside practice questions to how there's a heavily whatever, or a pressure, wherever you have. So if you take these practice exams from outside sources, they might have a sample answer that might not match up with whatever your professor wants. It doesn't mean that what you wrote is wrong. You just have to know, you just gotta catch that the sample answer of an outside source might not match up. Your answer would still be 100% correct. And to touch on what she said, take multiple breaks. I can't retain any information after I study more than there at the time. So take breaks and they
Thank you. That's great advice. Tegan?
Yeah, my approach is kind of similar and it varies based on each class. If I have a professor like Rayhan wanted to know names of cases for contracts. So I spent time making sure I knew what the name was of each case had to do with a certain thing, as opposed to other professors who are like, I don't care about case names, but I want this. So, that's how I kind of varied it based on the subject. I also I think it's best to engage in your outlines as much as possible. People are always like, oh, it's better if you handwrite your outlines. If you type your outlines, that's fine, but then maybe later sit down and handwrite it for practice. That's what I do. It just forces me to sit and think about each concept. But I have horrible handwriting, so I have like obviously a printed out, typed outline version too. And I also practice writing answers for questions that I'm sure I'm gonna get. And that can make a big difference for your 1L finals because, you know, like for Civ Pro, you know you're probably gonna get a jurisdiction question. You might get your doctrine. So practice what answering that kind of question would look like. Where you have sort of like a canned intro and a conclusion and you know the parts. So when you see that question come up on the test, you're not wasting time thinking like, okay, how do I write an answer to this problem? You know it.
Yeah, thank you, Tegan. That's all great advice. Kristana?
I would just agree with T and Willie. It's mostly the same advice that I would give is like rewriting outlines and just doing practice questions and knowing what your professor likes. But I also think it's just as important to make sure your home life is secure and set before you start studying. If you meal prep for the week or a couple of days beforehand, make sure you're eating like actual vegetables and not just processed food, because that really does help your mood so much. If it's just getting 10 minutes to yourself of peace and quiet, do that. I know I delete social media during exam period. So just really making sure all other outside factors are working in your favor so that you can study, I feel like is just as important as asking your professor how they prefer to have their essays written, things like that.
That's great advice. And one thing I heard Kristana say was kind of like boundaries. You're setting boundaries for, like, I would always text my family members who call me at the most inopportune times and say, hey, I'm going into finals. Just be aware, you know, I might not answer your phone call. And now I think the new iPhone update has a really cool thing where it lets you know if someone silenced notifications. I think that's really cool because now they know I'm not going to respond to you right away. So just making sure that you're setting yourself up for success. Deleting social media apps. I love that advice. I did that every year for finals, and it's so important because while it can be something to relax, you can like scroll through Instagram. It's not as relaxing as I feel like people think it might be, and a walk might be better, or like, since it's cold outside, I don't know, watch TV or something, like anything. It's just really cold, so I don't know if we can walk, but yeah, so making sure you set those boundaries. Okay, this question, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add two things also, kind of what Willie and Jean said. For the practice problems, if you find, because I also did that a lot, it helped me, just like Googling practice problems. And I agree, a lot of the answers are very different from how we're taught, how we're like taught to write. One thing you can do is if you write out your practice problems, you write out answers, I would also really recommend going to the professor and like running, if you're unsure of something, like running it through it with them and saying like, here's something I wrote out for this practice problem. Does this look right? Is there something I'm missing? Whatever, I think that's really helpful. And then also with kind of practicing writing out the questions you know you'll expect. Again, that's a good opportunity to bring into your professors or your TAs, but also make sure to do it before, not like don't do it the day before the exam. Your professors are gonna be busy or your TAs are gonna be busy. Do it like in advance, so plan for that. Like make sure that you give yourself time to actually like talk to your professors or TAs at like a good time, because your TAs are also doing exams and your professors are gonna be busy. They're probably not gonna respond to this right before. So think about that.
Really good advice. Okay, our next question. Remember I talked about being controversial? This is the little controversial question. Do you recommend studying in groups or alone? And some of you already touched on it, but just briefly, you know, alone or in groups, and briefly why. We'll start with you, Richie.
I have no attention span, so I need to study with others, especially because when it comes to exam period, I already know what I know. I want to know what you know, other people, because people understand things differently and get different things out of it. Also, when we say do practice questions, one, try not to do them without answers, and two, the EE, in my opinion, are the best practice questions to do.
The what?
In the library, the answers and explanation box.
There you go.
There's sets of them for proving the library, have really brilliant answers for that. But you can also do questions orally with friends. And so in groups, you can I used to make my friends debate questions with me. I would be like, you're gonna argue for government, blah, 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 because it was fun, engaging and it helped us learn more stuff. And you can explain cases to each other over and over again, just go back and forth. I don't like setting the result. I do it, you know, when I have to.
Willie, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of what she said, know your own preferences. I know we've all been in school a very long time, not just law school. I'm sure this is your first time studying for an exam, much different type of exam, of course. If you historically have studied well, better alone or in a group to do that, but definitely try one or the other to see if maybe in a law school setting, you learn that you like studying in a group, you like studying by yourself. Me, I like working by myself because when I study in groups, I try to help everybody else so much that I forget to study myself. So I just got everybody out.
Nobody should talk to me during exams. I like to be alone, please. I will not be, you either won't see me, or if you do, I'm like in a room by myself. I don't like studying with groups. I tried it, I think for midterms, and it was just so stressful to be around a bunch of people who like think they know what they're talking about, and then they're just like yelling at each other, and it was overwhelming, and Diana knows. You know, I was like, no. So I couldn't do it. I think it's beneficial to see how other people study. So I remember studying for an exam, and someone recommended a study tool, and I used that. It's really helpful for like a midterm. I think it was like Casebook Connect. They also have like quizzes on there, and I just didn't think about that. But they had quizzes and note cards and a bunch of stuff that I had no idea about. And one of my friends was like exclusively using that, and then I used it and I did really well on the next test. So I was thankful for that. But I didn't ever ask them questions about things or bounce ideas off of it. It is beneficial, and a lot of people will do that, but I think it just stresses me out. So know yourself and don't force yourself to study with people if you don't want to. You might feel like you're missing out, but it's just beneficial for you to study alone if that's what you like.
Absolutely. Christina?
I mostly studied alone, but I do see how group studies could be useful. I would say just make sure you know what you're talking about before you go into a group study and you're very confident and secure in what you know. If not, it might do more harm than good, especially first semester, 1L year when no one even has grades yet to even say anything. Like there's no rank, there's no anything for anyone to look at, anyone that's smarter than another. And a lot of times the loudest in the room might not be the smartest, especially before grades come out. So I would say to make sure your fundamentals are good if you want to go group study.
Tegan?
Yeah, anything I have to say is really already been said, but I think it depends. And something Kat said, I would echo, which is try out both, studying with other people and studying alone. I thought that I did best studying alone, but that was really because I hadn't found anybody that I thought I could study with the right way until Christina and I studied for Evans together. That's the only time I've ever studied with somebody. But that went great, so thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it really could depend also on the people you're studying with. Like you could, be tight with your friends, but some of my friends I would just argue with the whole time instead of studying with. And similar to Richie, I have a attention problem, which for me means I'm just gonna like chit chat about whatever instead of studying. I need to like lock myself someplace and I can study alone for a few hours and then maybe note a few concepts I'm having issues with and then text Christina and be like, hey, do you wanna like talk about, what the hearsay rule, whatever, something like that. And then we'll talk through that, figure it out, go back our separate ways. So that's kind of, I guess, like a hybrid model.
Yeah, like a check-in buddy, someone that even like if we would still do work that weren't related, but we'd still be doing work together. So as long as you have that good relationship with somebody, but that was 2 years. Yeah, it wasn't even 1 hour. Yeah, I don't know, trial and error.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think my advice is always, you're here and something you did in the past has made you successful to get here. So however you studied, in undergrad or previously, that worked, at least arguably and theoretically worked for you. So especially first semester, as both of them said, you don't know how everyone's going to do. So you might study in a group of people who might not do that well. I mean, just like half the class, the curve. And so do what works for you. And if in the spring you didn't do that well, you can shift your plan and try some different things. Regine, do you have something to add?
I feel like the odd one out here. you don't have to pick between one or the other. You can do like an hour of study and then the rest alone. Like that hybrid situation, that's what you're supposed to do. You're not gonna spend 9 hours of your day in a group. Don't study with people who bother you. You're gonna get bothered. Somebody knows something that you don't, and you're gonna have to filter information because someone can say something to you and you're gonna be like, I really don't think the sky is blue. Don't like waste your time. That is actually true. Moving on, but you're gonna have to learn how to filter, and so dealing with people is actually a decent way to practice doing that. And explaining things to others is a really good way to learn the material. So you're very cool, but also not that cool.
I'll just add on top of that, divide and conquer if you do want it to group study. So everyone is not slightly knowledgeable about everything that one person is teaching and other people are listening. That might give a little bit more structure to group study.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have an agenda. Usually
Yes.
Yeah, all great advice. All right, so the next question is, what do I do if I fail an exam? And this is, I'll put an asterisk. If you think you fail or you actually fail. So both are possible. What do I do? Ruchi, we'll start with you. Oh, actually, Tegan, let's start on this end, sorry.
Well, if you think you failed, like take a deep breath and wait till you actually get your grade. Because you could be totally wrong. If you do actually fail, which isn't likely, it's okay. I'd be realistic about it. If throughout this whole process, for some reason, you were like, I hate this, I hate law school, I hate what I'm learning, I hate how it works. Maybe, I mean, this very rarely happens, but maybe think about if this is something that you want to be doing. However, very rare, but to be realistic. So if you just failed a class, think about what happened. Meet with your professor. They will really respect the fact that you want to sit down and be like, hey, I messed up and help me understand. Professors may be willing to kind of walk through what it is you messed up on. You can explain your study process, but just tackle it head on. Those kinds of issues are always better to just address. Then you can figure out why you did it, change it for next semester, and really you'll just take the class again. I know people who fail classes, they go on and lead wonderful lives. It'll be okay.
Absolutely. Chrisana.
Yeah, I got B's and C's one all year. So I was close to the bottom of the class, close to the bottom of the class. There's time to recover. I mean, I'm obviously talking to people here, so I'd say there's something right to recover from that. But it's really not the end of the world. Depending on the class or how close the curve was, you really gotta go see the professor. I know my 1 year, our civil procedure exam was, you could have the CivPro rules with you. And it was open book in that sense, you could have the rules with you, and the B was in the 90s. So you could have failed or done poorly, but still knew what you were talking about. So I would recommend just go to see the professors and really try to bounce back from it. You do have a couple weeks to really process and debrief from school. So just, it happens. It happened to me. I didn't fail, but I came close. And it's not the end of the world. You have 2 years to make up for it. More than 2 years, 2.5 years to make up for it. And it's really not the end of the world.
Thank you. Kat.
I thought I failed the test, and I called my mom, told her I was gonna be a lawyer, I was gonna drop out, like I just very much wasn't, I was gonna make it. I didn't fail, but I very much thought I did, and it was hard because I was with my section after, and everyone was talking about the test, and it was the test that I definitely thought I failed, and people were like, oh my god, that was so easy, or like, oh, that question, and I'm like, I'm gonna jump off something right now, which is not a wellness thing, but it was
But a realistic thing.
realistically was not mentally, I was not good. But I would not talk about the test, and I just if people ask me what I did or like how I did not talk about it. I didn't want to know. And then I moved on to the next test and was like, okay, we're not gonna worry about this. We still got like one more exam to do. But then I got my grade and I didn't fail. So I did, what they're talking about is at the end of the semester, you can like go to Teresa's office and like look at your exam, spend as much time as you need, read through every little possible thing, look at the breakdown, figure out like what you did wrong, what you did right. And then if you still have questions, go talk to your professor. I think you can still talk to your TAs, really understand what you did wrong so that you can do better the next semester. Even if you're not taking that class again, it's important to know what you did. If you do fail, they offer classes over the summer. You can retake a lot of your classes. Don't be ashamed, like it's hard. Like Christina said, sometimes the curve is really, really high. It just depends like if everyone did well. Retake a class if you can. If you have questions about summer classes, talk to like financial aids, like see how much it costs, talk to your professor, talk to your TA, figure out what works best for you and your schedule, but don't like give up, don't drop out.
Diana, guest speaker. She is.
Professor may not work for how you study or how you learn. And I took it again for the 12 year for the summer for 12 year. I did really well when I took it. And I basically had to like retake the entire class to decide the whole everything for my first class. So sometimes if you get a different professor, that may actually work out for you. It's just like how they teach. Sometimes it doesn't click, and that's fine. There's also legal methods if you fail a class. Professor Armstrong does teach, and she teaches very well when it comes to like how to actually do a law school exam and how the bar exam will actually work. So she does really well there. She's one that was here earlier. So it'll be okay. You'll be here. Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Diana. We'll get to the other two panels and then we'll get your question. Willie, go ahead.
So I guess not to repeat too much everybody else said. Completely agree with everything everybody else said, especially Tegan. I found that I think it was like some law school voodoo magic where if you think you failed an exam, you actually did really well. Not really fail. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
on the off chance that anyone does fail, everybody says it's gonna be okay. There's plenty of time to recover. And if you retake the class, if you get a higher grade on the retake, that's the one that actually counts for your GPA. So the bad score won't be over your head forever if you take.
Absolutely. Ruchi?
You know, you're more than this exam. I don't want to be a lawyer for the rest of my life, but there's more I want to do. Failures is not something that you are, but something that happens to you, and it's not what will happen. Sometimes there's just a disconnect between like the way you've been learning the law and translating that into analysis and writing. Like, this is all about writing. And how good are you at organizing ideas, understanding what's happening? And sometimes there's just a disconnect in that, and you just have to figure it out, and you know, it's helpful with your exam. Those skills you pick up will be useful. Or I'm not doing the circus, but maybe.
Absolutely. Do you have a question?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you for saying that we wouldn't drop out. This entire time I thought that if I failed an exam, that was it for me. So that's a little reassuring.
No.
Up till now, but second, I just wanted to ask, like, for example, contracts, most of us are behind. I'll speak for myself. The man is on page 700 and I'm like hundreds of pages behind. Like, realistically, when you know you have this short amount of period of time, like, what's the best strategy? Because I know I can't read all of that in time. And I have like older outlines because the teachers are like, don't do that. And it's like, how do you realistically go about it when you're time constrained and you know you're not at this point?
Yeah, that's great.
I would say just don't overthink it. You mentioned you had outlines from the past, you have the table of contents from the book. Just try to narrow in on the topics versus the cases, because a lot of professors want to know that you know the topic versus the exact case, the citation, everything like that. I think I'm famous for getting behind in class. It's just a lot. Reading is a lot sometimes. So just really get the big concepts and then narrow it down. Like, I don't know what is in contracts anymore, but like the end of contracts, I know it gets a little wonky. So just try to get the big topics and then narrow down to the rules, the exceptions. Because if you try to reach straight through and learn as if you were learning in class, it's gonna be too much and you'll miss a lot of stuff. So just try to go over the big topics and then funnel down is the best way to catch up. Because I get behind too. It's still happens till this day.
Absolutely. Good question. Yeah.
So when you go into your exam, what you're doing is you're taking like this like palette of colors that you've been given and cases and stuff. You need to break those down into sentences that you can put in your exam. You don't need to read all the cases, all the notes to do that. You need to translate your outline into workable sentences like I was talking about,
because it doesn't matter how well you know parole evidence if you can't write the rules out and understand how to write it. Also, you can come talk to us, like, you can email me, talk to you forever about contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. Diana?
For contracts, I would read the comments of the rules. They're actually very helpful. They actually give you examples of what they mean, and most of the time the tests you take from the comments, at least from our professor, I don't know if we have. Like, a lot of them use the comments as.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Well, yeah, use the comments, give examples. And also, I don't know if this will have the links or the UCCs, but just go over that. Just start from where you start from syllabus and scroll down. So even like look at the book and start from the beginning. Just if you're behind read the rules.
Professors say that normally gives out an outline ahead of your exam. So you will actually get some exam before your exam as well. And he's notorious for repeating questions from past exams and like changing some things from the midterm. So like if you still have your midterm, I would recommend going over that. Like, the question won't be exactly the same, but like he does pull from it.
Yeah.
A lot of professors do that.
Memorize the restatements. That's
That's
like,
important.
I sound like a lawyer.
Okay, I have a follow-up.
Sure.
So it's open notes, so how much memorizing?
I quit.
Oh, yeah, that's.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, but we don't know if it's online or if it's like a paper, which.
Ask.
Yeah, because it's a big difference with exam soft, like they have different options, like they can completely shut down your computer and all of their app functions, or you could just have it like a window, so you really have to ask.
So we took exams obviously at home on ExamSoft, and there's things that they can turn off, like copy and paste they can turn off.
Spell check.
Spell check they can turn off, which is not fun. I can't spell. So like you can control find like something on your outline, but if it's like this big chunk and you were hoping to like copy and paste that, you might not be able to copy and paste that. So like Ruchi said, like summarize, like have some like bullet points of what maybe a rule is, just so you know what it is and can write about it. Just don't expect to be able to copy and paste everything. And I've had professors where we had like an open book once for comma, and the perfect answer was in the book. And I know several people who like wrote straight from the book and still didn't get an awesome grade. So just, I don't know, it's not that easy.
Yeah, Willie.
If anyone else has any sort of open-ish or open type exam, act like it's not open book, because if you rely on the open book, you're gonna spend an hour doing the first exam question, looking up the rules. That's what I did for mine, except when I had my first contract, so I thought, oh, it's open book, it's no long gotta study. And then I spent an hour on the first essay, and I was like, wait a minute, this is right. So, and of course, again, I've recovered from that. Yeah, I feel like it's not open book. That way you retain more information, so you don't have to rely on your notes. They're nice to have, but don't rely on them.
Yeah. Tegan?
Just to condense what everyone's saying, ask your professor what the format of the exam is going to be, and if it's on the exam soft, which tools are going to be enabled. They know what this means by now, because when we had to go through moving things to be virtual, there was so much trial and error. So they'll know the answers to these questions. And they'll be like, you'll have access to copy and paste, highlighting, there won't be internet. Ask them, make sure you know you've got that information. Then make a plan.
And if it's open book, they're not looking for perfect rule statements, they're looking for good analysis, so.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind.
Alex Marie?
Ask your professor like how many questions it's going to be and how much time you have allotted, because I don't know if this is still true, but in my rare open book experience, I'm pretty jealous. It was more time pressure than it would have been if it was closed book, and that's by design. So that you're not just sitting there reading.
Okay, so we have a question from the Zoom that I want to make sure the panelists get a chance to answer. This person asked for advice if you feel like you know the material until you get to the test, and then you can't think because you're anxious. So does anyone have an inclination to answer? Willie?
That happened to me actually with first. I started the exam, first fact pattern, completely blanked, and I had no idea what I was gonna write. What works for me is to, well, one, stop reading and take a breath, and then skip the question, come back to it later. Find a question that is familiar to you, and that'll be a good place to start, because you don't have to complete the exam order. It doesn't matter what order you're doing. If you're blanking in the beginning, skip and find something that's familiar to you. Do that immediately. And from there, the rest should come back to you naturally. From there, you feel good about completing one question that's familiar to you. You can go back to the one that you blanked on. You might be like, oh, okay, I get it.
That's great advice. Yeah.
I would also say, I think this speaks to doing practice exams, because I could, give general advice on how to deal with anxiety, but you might know what works best for you. That's like taking a breath, looking someplace else. But if you're putting yourself in a situation that's gonna replicate what it's like on test day, that's the best way to get comfortable. When you sit down, you're like, okay, I do know this, I can do this, and practice taking a test time where you're like, okay, that's it, that was the hour, that's what I've got. It'll just help you get in the right state of mind when you take the test, so you're not as anxious.
Absolutely. Alex Marie?
I promise I'll stop there. A lot of students don't finish the exam, so like don't let that be a part of your anxiety. Like it's not uncommon to like not totally finish like an essay or to like skip a question altogether and not have time to get back to it. Like yeah, obviously it's going to impact your grade, but that is something things doing well. Just keep that in mind too. If you didn't definitely go through your exam, because it does not mean you automatically fail. Also, if you're worried about anxiety, how to study great yoga on December 6th from 11 to 12 in the gym, because that's when we go.
Yes. Monday at 11 in the gym. Kat?
Just with the whole time pressure thing, I'm a very slow typer. It's not for me, but here I am. So I am always running out of time for exams, especially if there's a lot of writing, less multiple choice. Write something down, even if it's not like a full, like if you read the question, you kind of know what it is, put whatever you can down if you're running out of time. So at least you can say like, for these reasons, it's, I don't know, whatever, not guilty. And then there's your conclusion, you get your 1 point. And then if you can put a little analysis in there, sure, but like, or bullet point, whatever you can, so maybe it's not blank. I've left questions blank just because I didn't have time, because when we switched to online, everything was extremely time pressured, and it was like, they didn't really know what they were doing, we didn't know what we were doing. So it was just kind of like getting whatever information you can. You'll still do well or pass. Like I didn't do bad on ones that I missed filling in information for, just because the questions I didn't answer, I put everything into. So don't feel bad. Also don't feel like you're gonna drop out after not answering a question on an exam. Oh, flip the page, because sometimes there's somebody, I think it was Cole years ago, he like missed an entire essay question because he didn't flip the very last page and see there was a question. So always look at the last page. He was very smart.
Yeah.
And he didn't answer a whole question, so.
All right, so it is 4 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and just end this formally, and we'll end the recording. Thank you all so much for being here, and let me know if you need anything.